All right, everybody. Welcome to another Perceptive podcast here on the Game Wisdom channel, where we examine the art and science of games. I'm, of course, Josh Blaser, and we have another great cast for you tonight. We're going to be talking with two of the members of the team of Redstart Interactive, who worked on the game Get a Grip Chip. This was a 2D platformer we played a few weeks ago, and we enjoyed it for its design and kind of take on almost like a between a casual and mid-core platformer. And they're here to talk about the design as well as a little bit more about level design and platforming in general. So please welcome to the cast, Vicky and John. How are you two doing?
We're doing great. How
Yeah.
about you?
It's great to have you both on. We've been talking about trying to get the time for this, and of course, we are streaming this the day before Thanksgiving. So I'm sure everybody isn't too busy right now, right?
Yeah, enjoy the turkey.
Yeah, it's good. This is good, cooking fodder.
there, there we go. But it's great to have both of you on. Like I said, we played Get a Grip Chip and we enjoyed it. For those of you watching this live or recorded, I'll include a link to my video review in the description in the recorded version of it. But to get the ball rolling, can you two both kind of talk about like who you are, kind of like what your background is, and for those of you who don't know what Get a Grip Chip is, what is that game about?
Sure.
Yeah,
You want to go first?
sure. Hi guys, I'm Vicky, and I am primarily the level designer for Get a Grip Chip, and did some design work on Chip itself, but primarily like the obstacle to obstacle gameplay that you see is usually me, and then
I'm John. So I was the lead programmer, amongst other things. We both kind of do a lot of different things, for the development of this game and for Redstart. But yeah, I was primarily the lead programmer. And yeah, in terms of Get a Grip Chip, so as you mentioned, it's a platformer. You play as a small robot, and the story of the game is that one of your worker robot co-workers has gone haywire and has started sort of attacking the factory that you work in. And this disaster has caused you to fall to the bottom of the factory. You have to make your way back up. And as you do that, you have to save these little battery bots. You have to find and collect them throughout the whole game, and they help you to progress.
yes, they power the factory as well.
All right, and is Get a Grip Chip your company's like first official game, or have you done other projects before?
It is our first official game. We had tooled around with Unity before, just prior to this, but didn't really.
Yeah, it's our first commercial launch. We're pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
So I guess my first question then is, what made your team decide to focus on a 2D platformer as your first title, as opposed to any of the other myriad of genres out there?
Yeah.
I think it was actually familiarity and the confidence that we felt we could build a 2D platformer.
Yeah.
And
we wanted to make something that we were confident we could finish, and we could finish at a high level of quality. I apologize for the sirens outside. So I think we wanted to sort of bite off something we could chew. And then we're both pretty familiar with platformers in general, so we felt like we had a good grasp of some of the design needs, and I think that was a big part of it.
Yeah.
All right, great. And with the platformer genre, those of you watching this, my second book that I wrote is on platforming, game design, deep dive platformer. So I definitely have a little bit of experience playing the platformer genre. And it is a very fascinating genre, just in terms of there's so many examples of it out there that it's kind of hard to, break out with your own unique take on it. Mm-hmm. And when we were playing Get a Grip Chip, we definitely noticed inspirations from, obviously Bionic Commando with the swinging mechanic and such. I guess my next question, were there any other mechanics or design that you were thinking about with coming up with Get a Grip Chip, like how did you settle on the grapple or swing mechanic as your primary movement tech?
Mhm. Yeah. We did play around with a couple of different ideas. We did a lot of prototyping up front. And I guess maybe we should mention, the main mechanic of Get a Grip Chip is this grappling mechanic. It's very similar to Bionic Commando in the way that it works, or maybe like the grappling hook in Zelda.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a bunch of prototyping. We were playing around with a couple of different ideas. We had also had a couple of previous projects that we were working on, and there were some aspects of them we liked and some we didn't. We had played around with various sort of like boosting mechanics or firing projectiles, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and we just decided we were to do the full game production cycle. We just picked one mechanic and just that we liked, and that with some playtesting that we felt had appeal, and just ran with that one.
Mm-hmm.
I think from there we actually, so that was like part of the inspiration, and then we took it out for playtesting, and then a lot of people came back and said like, this reminds me of this game, this reminds me of this game. That's actually how we found out. It was a lot like Bionic Commando. And actually, I don't think either one of us had actually played Bionic Commando.
Yeah, I think I'd seen it when I was younger, but not really extensively played it.
And so then like actually a lot of research spiraled from there.
Yeah, I think the playtesting was sort of integral in terms of choosing the direction to go ultimately, or sort of which of the elements we had play tested were we were going to go forward with.
Mm-hmm. And how long did your team spend working on Get a Grip Chip?
9 months.
Oh.
So it was about 3 months. Actually, we spent 3 months on the character alone, and then once we finalized the character, which actually coincided with the shutdown in New York. We're based in New York. And so it worked out in that sense. And then we moved on to building the levels from there, I think, for the remaining 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, well, technically we're still working on some pieces.
Yeah, there's some content updates.
Yeah. And a lot of those sort of post-launch stuff, there's still a ton of work, as always.
And I'm actually located in New Jersey, so we're kind of somewhat close.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think, like, with a 9-month development time, like, we've spoken with developers on these casts before, and it's definitely challenging to obviously finish a game, and it's great to hear that, development didn't get, like, too, bogged down, especially with the pandemic going on.
Yeah. And I think, in terms of making a game that focuses on one mechanic, I think that, these decisions were all sort of tied together. We wanted to make something that was achievable, and we tried to make other decisions in the design of the game to keep our timeline sensible and keep ourselves sane.
Yeah, and that didn't add like extraneous amounts of work. And we tried to think through like any features that got added.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're very diligent about cutting things that weren't totally necessary. Yeah, feature creep.
Yeah. And that actually takes me to my next question. Like, given the kind of very streamlined development time, were there any mechanics that either of you or anyone on the team kind of like really fought for, but like in the end just kind of left on the cutting room floor?
We wanted to do parallax. Actually, I think that would have added some really cool visual appeal.
Yeah.
But we just we didn't have the tools to manage designing the parallax assets.
Yeah, that unfortunately was left on the cutting room floor.
Yeah.
But perhaps for our next game, we'll be able to manage that. But and then I think we did try to all sort of rally around the one main mechanic and really fully explore every way that we could. Mess with that mechanic, basically.
Yeah.
I think we had a moment I mean, it was relatively early in the development, I suppose, but we had a moment where we really realized that we have to have a lot of objects moving around in the game.
Yeah.
Like everything's got to move. There's got to be a ton of moving platforms.
Yeah, I actually remember that moment during playtesting. Somebody just like basically put down the controller after playing. It was all static platforms at that point and static anchors, and they were like, "Okay, so this is it." So yeah, that was when we realized we had to add like moving, like a lot of things. Like we knew early on we would be able to do enemies, the animation. The scope of animation would have definitely been too much at the time.
For enemies, yeah.
And that's actually another thing of why it's in the factory is essentially the way the objects move, like the obstacles, is inherently animation in there, so that was a little bit newer. So we wanted to keep it in the factory theme to, I guess, like make the design fit the scene.
Yeah, we were able to create animations for everything and movements that felt believable in a factory, and not have to worry too much about like a bunch of human characters that have to have very fluid movements. That that can be quite a large challenge.
Yeah, like any organic matter.
Yeah, but the moving objects and platforms and everything certainly was something where once we had more of those put into the game and we saw how people were responding to it in playtesting, we just tried to put in as many as we possibly could.
Yeah, and speaking about kind of level design and all the ways you approach, I think that that's a really good segue in talking more about the mechanics of Get a Grip Chip and building these levels out. Because, like the two of you were saying, you kept to the main mechanic, obviously the grapple or that kind of swinging. And Get a Grip Chip is not a long game. I think it's like 40 levels, somewhere around there. And this is, I think, one of the challenges of like platformer design is that how much do you actually put into these games? Because I've seen developers who will maybe go, let's add 80, 90 levels, just throw as many things we can do into this game, and ends up feeling either bloated or you're just repeating content. And one of the things I appreciate about Get a Grip Chip, again, is that every level kind of felt like its own unique thing. And that, of course, is then delineated down into each one of the 5 worlds. So, I guess my next question is, how did your team kind of approach, I guess, building these levels out? Like, in terms of how hard you wanted to make it, what was kind of like your overall philosophy, things like that?
Yeah, so I guess we recognized early on that each level essentially had to be quote different, and like it had its own theme. So we actually just took a spreadsheet and just started listing out the different things we could do, and then just cross-referencing it with the developers and the artists for like the artists of like which levels inspired them for art. We just had like the general movement and an idea, and then the developers, we just talked to them about like, is this feasible? We actually had lights turning on and off at one point as an idea and nixed that.
Yeah, a full lighting system.
Yeah. that was not going to be feasible in this project, but a lot. So we started with like an idea across them, and then simultaneously was just like doing the blocking out of like how you would flow, and was also just like learning level design at the same time.
Yeah, I think there was quite a lot of experimentation, especially early on. I remember in particular there were a couple of test levels we had towards the beginning where we had, I think, too many ideas in one level, and so in some conversation we were talking about how the levels just end up being a lot stronger when there's really one main idea, or maybe 2 at most, for each level. And breaking down into a spreadsheet of just a pile of ideas. Really helped to separate those.
Yeah. And actually, like we knew we wanted to do about 5 worlds, and I think originally think within those 5 worlds. Oh, and then so we had the artists create the visual obstacles from there.
And concept art, yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, so they chose the color theme, and we kind of like, we actually ended up shifting the worlds around a little bit depending on like just the color appeal. And I think
yeah, there was some good back and forth, I think, between level design and our artists. You know, we would sort of get almost like a mechanical idea for what the level should do or focus on, and then they might do some sketching and you know, come up with what sort of element that's going to look like in the factory.
Yeah.
And we would tweak the levels based on that. We tweak the art, and there was some nice back and forth.
I think, and then later on, we actually, like, based on the obstacles, like the lasers we learned are extremely hard. So
very difficult.
So they actually eventually got moved into world. They're in world 5, and like that adds to like theming it, so lasers are in world 5, partially because we realized during playtesting they're so difficult, and it actually, like, it further solidified the idea of like each world feels distinct and each level feels distinct.
Yeah, and what you two were describing there about keeping to a principal mechanic for each level, that's definitely something that I talked about in my book, that good level design, especially for platformers, is that it's better to build a level around one mechanic and, you know, have like 5 levels per mechanic versus one level that has 5 different mechanics. Because then it just becomes a very cluttered mess of trying to figure out where everything fits in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like it also felt like we were trying to do this as well, so the whole game wouldn't feel the same. By like squeezing certain assets into certain levels. I think like the collapsing stuff is almost primarily it's primarily in world 3, and it's definitely in world 5, but it's not in 2 and 4, I think.
Yeah, so it helped to spread out some of the content that we have and make each world feel fresher, because we're not trying to cram too much into the beginning. I was also going to say, I think that aspect of the level design helped a lot with players getting used to the gameplay, or just learning how to play, basically.
Like learning by repetition. Just like, I don't know if anyone like played music, danced, did sports, like all those repetitive skills.
Getting the muscle memory up, basically.
We try to do things like don't introduce something new during like a boss fight or a chase sequence. Some sequence where the player's under a lot of pressure to perform perfectly. It should be doing actions that they're familiar with at this point, so they should have seen it a couple of times. They should have been able to practice it in a safe place.
And especially with the chase levels, or like our version of boss levels, because it was basically asking for precision there. I guess like also interesting, like back to our thing about how like animating characters was going to be quite difficult. It's actually why we made them chase levels, which is a very, very direct influence from Rayman Legends. We wanted to basically we didn't want to have Chip beating up characters, at least not in this game. So we were trying to avoid combat, at least for this game. And we felt that having our boss levels focused around more of a chase, where you have to platform you have to platform harder than you platformed before. Was sort of an appropriate like escalation, and creates a good challenge for a boss fight. And the main sort of antagonist, I think, in the game provides a nice vehicle for running away or chasing them down.
And one thing that I kind of wanted to elaborate on that you said a few minutes ago is that you didn't play Bionic Commando originally when you were, but people kind of brought that up. So where did kind of the grapple mechanic like originate from? If you didn't, obviously not having played that game there to be inspired by it.
It's a good question. So I'm trying to think the exact origin of it, but we basically had some prototypes, and we had another project that we had been working on where essentially we had too many mechanics going on at once.
We were able to pick.
Yeah. So yeah, we looked at each of the mechanics that we were trying out in that sort of test game, and we had this grappling mechanic in sort of a different form then. But there was hints of it there, and we really liked how that one felt, and we felt that it was sort of, it was interesting enough of a mechanic, or like it's expressive enough that we could carry it across the length of an entire game, or carry it across that much content.
Yeah, I think like something. I guess like traditional platformers were an influence there because like with like Jump, you're like bound by gravity, and we didn't really want to be. We wanted to make a game where you weren't really bound by gravity, which is why you can like hang on to the anchors and go in any direction.
Mm-hmm.
And
we were also. You just made me think. We also wanted to be sort of judicious about how much just completely open sort of freedom the player has to traverse a level, or to sort of try and overcome challenges in the game. And yeah, I think part of that was us working through some of the level design, or learning more about level design as we worked on the game. We sort of got better and better. But yeah, initially I think or at least I was like a bit nervous that if we let players jump anywhere, that they get stuck in a corner, or we'd have some challenge where you just jump over it and it's not a problem. Yeah, so I think maybe to answer your question in shorter form, I think it was through quite a lot of play testing and prototyping, and finding something where we felt like there was enough in there that we could expand on it, and that we could carry it across the whole game.
Yep, and as we've said before, like for those of you watching, like we've spoken about the importance of playtesting and making sure that you get eyes on your game to see, what do people think about that overall design. And with Get a Grip Chip, there we go. In terms of the difficulty of the game, it felt like it had like a decent progression curve. Like for like people watching me or watching the stream and don't know who I am, like I've played a lot of platformers. Like I have, I've done Super Meat Boy, I've done the classics, so like I'm definitely on the higher end of the scale. But for the game, I guess, what kind of audience were you aiming for with Get a Grip Chip, and did you have to do any kind of redesigns or altering the game to try and fit that in?
Yes. I will say, I think a week before launch, we redesigned the tutorial.
Yeah, tutorials are difficult.
Yeah. That I think we worked on that was one of the most. I think that was something we spent the most time on. We did the tutorial very, very early on to just get people accustomed to it, so we could just hand people the game and they could just pick it up and try to figure it out.
Yeah, we could step back and just let them play.
Yeah, and then even towards the end, we had an aha moment, is that we needed to give people more freedom to basically explore that mechanic they had just learned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we ended up our tutorial is essentially the first level. Mm-hmm. So we don't have a separate tutorial necessarily. It's just you learn during the first level. And yeah, we ended up extending it, especially the very beginning, because while people were able to pick up the game and learn it, we found that if we gave them a little more space to just have some fun with it, that they had an easier time going forward. I think it was more memorable. It was easier for them to just think through.
Yeah, they had figured it out.
Yeah.
As well.
I think. Well, it wasn't even that early on. Up until we changed it, I think the tutorial kind of had more of a stop and start feel where we would throw some new information at you relatively quickly for the first level. And so you kind of struggle to learn it for a minute, and then you complete that, and it was okay.
Yeah, and then you kind of got it, and then you then had to learn a new thing.
Yeah. So by extending it, the player has more time to actually enjoy the thing they just learned, instead of moving right on to the next thing.
I think we just added like between when the first message popped up, we just added a mini sequence to remind you how to do it, but then also allowed you to move through that sequence, that review sequence, like a couple different ways.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually something we realized like partway through, is like everyone plays differently.
Yeah.
And so we just tried, and like, we're not going to anticipate everyone, but the earlier versions of the game, you had like one path to move forwards. It was basically a precision platformer early on. It was really hard.
Yeah.
And so like as when we had the realization that people will just play different ways, we tried to just add like, we added the ability to go backwards. You can navigate backwards, and then like you could go this way, or this way.
Mm-hmm.
Forwards.
Yeah, and I think letting people explore or try a different method, to get over an obstacle, that sort of thing. We wanted to allow them to do that, I think through playtesting, that's one thing we felt was sort of stopping people from getting into a good flow, which is like. Just making sure that if they want to do something, we should let them do it.
What else do we? There's a secret room in World 5 that was there's actually a secret room in a whole level in World 5 that was the fifth level in World 1. It's got lasers in it, but we didn't necessarily, like, this was like kind of a time constraint thing. It was like quite hard for World 1. And so instead of, like, we did a lot of this actually, instead of basically like redoing the level, we just like shifted a bunch of them into World 5.
Yeah, we definitely shuffled levels around based on the playtesting and how difficult they were.
Yeah.
And I would say that's probably the number one thing that we did, which was to adjust the difficulty towards the end of the project.
Probably the last half of the project was adding forgiveness.
Playing the game for 9 months straight, basically. You get pretty good at it. And it becomes very difficult to see how difficult a level is.
Actually, I think like for the last month, so like the last month out of the 9, I actually stopped making changes based off of I could only make changes based off of play testers, because there was just like, I basically would test, like if I made a change, I basically tested that it would more or less work and it wasn't broken, but we would just keep play testing.
We're trying to find people that hadn't played the game before, especially towards the end of the project, to make sure that the difficulty was sane.
We are very grateful for the playtesters that recorded video. A lot of them recorded video, and that was actually like really helpful, because like the live playtesting, you have to take notes really fast, whereas like with the video you can like go back and forth, and actually like that helped a lot.
We did do some in-person playtesting more towards the beginning of the project. We're more in like prototyping type phase, and I think that was actually really useful, because you could see people's reactions and see if they're enjoying it, and make sure that like fundamentally the concept is sound. But we're getting into like the nitty-gritty of the level design and the difficulty balancing. Regular playtesting was always good, but having the videos to sort of very carefully
micro tweak.
Make single unit,
half unit, like moving an edge half a unit out, or just half a unit down, so you didn't have to like press as like precisely to just get over that lip.
Yeah, and I suppose the audience that we were looking to grab here is, you know, we didn't want it to be super precision platforming. Definitely easier than something like Super Meat Boy, where you're just dying over and over and over again. Yeah, we wanted to make something enjoyable. You could sit down and play a couple of levels, and have some fun with it.
And it wouldn't be like hard to get back into it.
Yeah. The time to be up and running and playing should be quick and easy. And, you shouldn't be overly frustrated.
I guess like something interesting is I think you rewrote the character controller like in the second half of the project, which like that. Yeah, so it's like that actually was like a big design change. Like under the hood, it changed like almost nothing at all on the surface, but it did add a lot of forgiveness. And I think like what's noticeable is the way Chip catches ledges.
Yeah, so he doesn't have like your traditional like ledge hang or anything like you can't sort of hoist yourself up. But we wanted to give some forgiveness to players if they just barely made it onto a ledge or just barely missed. Basically, it should sort of feel good if you're close enough.
That like, oh, I just barely made this.
Yeah. If any, if there's ever a situation like that, we tried to lean in favor of the player. Partway through the project, we rewrote our character controller and the collisions and to make it work better, mostly, but also to have that forgiveness in there so that Chip will sort of, he'll kind of tilt his way onto a ledge.
I think we do some stuff in the animation to make that like very appealing as well.
Yeah, he's got an animation where he's kind of teetering at the edge. So I do think that like adjusting the difficulty is a big part of the level design throughout the whole process. But especially at the end when we had essentially finished creating all the levels. All the content was in there. And we just spent a month or a couple of months really just tweaking the difficulty, adding forgiveness, adding making sure things flowed well.
Yeah, and excuse me. And what Vicky was saying about getting feedback from playtesters, I think is another very important point for people watching. Is that we've said this many times on many of these developer interviews and just on our Sunday live shows that it's very easy to fall into that trap that if you play your game day in and day out for months, if not years on end, that it becomes very easy for you. And it becomes hard to kind of figure out what somebody else is feeling about your game. And I guess with regards to kind of the playtesting sessions, what kind of, feedback did you get that, were there anything that you really had to focus on? Like somebody said something, you were like, yes, we need to change this for our game.
There's one in particular I remember, a piece of feedback that, I think when we heard it, it was just like, of course, like what were we thinking? And I suppose it's a relatively small thing, but originally, as you're going through the levels and you're collecting these battery bots, this is like the main collectible in the game. You collect them by using the grappling hook and grappling towards them. And so originally, when you did that, the grapple hook would sort of connect with the battery bot and you would pick it up.
Yeah.
And it would essentially use your grapple. So it would consume it. So you couldn't...
You would have to press the grapple button again to hook.
Mm-hmm.
So this feedback was like, can we just grapple through the bots?
Yeah, it feels like the way the level's designed and the way that everything's arranged, it feels like I should be able to sort of collect this and attach to the anchor points all in one go. I don't, the double click is kind of awkward,
and it was hard. You had to do it. You had to be really fast and actually quite precise to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Oh, and I just wanted to add, like, one thing that I notice is that when you pick up one of the Barry bots, it obviously doesn't like automatically get stored. You have to take it to a checkpoint. And one thing that came up in chat earlier was about just how well the checkpoints are set up. And the game features a lot of them, and of course, part of that is for minimizing difficulty, and all that is to make sure that you actually get those Barry bots. What was kind of like the decision or like the consensus from the group about how often checkpoints were placed?
Was it? It was a little contentious.
Yeah. For a long time, there was only 3 checkpoints per level. It helped with making the design actually like early on, and there was a lot of feedback that like we need more checkpoints, because I think what was frustrating was, especially with the secret rooms, was that if you died, then you would have to go like all the way back through just to get back into the secret room and then to get the bots, which was like really tedious and frustrating.
We're trying to avoid tedious and frustrating. Yeah. This is something else we heard from playtesters, although I think maybe somewhat indirectly. I'm not sure we ever really got the feedback that I'd like to. I don't think we ever heard someone say, "I'd like to have more checkpoints." I'd like to have a checkpoint here or there. That exact piece of feedback, maybe one or two people have mentioned it, but we would get feedback that was, essentially that was our solution to it.
It was like, this is frustrating. Like, this bit is frustrating, or like a lot of the feedback was, I wish I could do this. And so we just looked at like a bunch of different options that we could do depending on like the scope of programming, the scope of art. And I think in the end we came up with the most feasible would be to just go through each level. And I think the logic there was to put down checkpoints near doors into rooms. And I think after 1 to 2 bots, but there would be a checkpoint after like the second bot for sure. And then so we did have to adjust a lot of the levels, which was definitely worth it. And so and then the next rule we would add was basically the last jump right before that checkpoint was not going to be a spike. It would just like get like slightly more difficult, and then it would drop down in intensity. So like it was much more easy to make it.
Yeah, we tried to avoid any extremely difficult things right at the end of a level.
or a sequence.
Yeah, or a sequence,
Yeah.
And what was I going to say? I do think we did get the feedback that it got tedious to go through the same, especially a secret area.
Yeah.
To go through that again, because the secret areas tend to be a little more challenging.
Yeah.
There was also a small sort of technical reason why we went with more checkpoints as a solution to that problem. So I think it was suggested, could we just sort of save the game if you go through a door, something like that, right? Can you just sort of have an automatic checkpoint? And that actually proved to be somewhat challenging for us to add in this sort of like other type of checkpoint. The save data for the game would have to behave differently. And anyways, it ended up being sort of like a surprisingly large challenge for us to add something like that. So instead, we just
designed our way around it.
Yeah, we adjusted the level design to accommodate.
Yeah.
And avoiding those spikes and just like getting the feel of the level right. Again, like that is very tricky for like any developer, especially for platforming or action-based games. And it sounds like as you and your team were developing the game, that it really did come down to figuring out what was kind of the flow that you want each level to have. Because there are some games that will put that immense difficulty spike. Pony in chat is discussing a DK Tropical Freeze, for instance. And yes, or even something like Super Meat Boy, that, that final trick is often going to be the hardest thing. And of course, you're going to fail that. And then you repeat, all the other stuff you had to do again. And What you were both talking about a minute ago with regards to having checkpoints after a secret room. That is another, I think, very understated aspect of good level design. Is that you don't want the player to repeat a lot of content, especially if they get through something hard and then they die before they get to a checkpoint. Well, now you gotta do it all over again. And
Yeah.
finding that line between challenging and frustrating is, no pun intended, very difficult for a lot of developers because it's easy to make something very hard, as I'm sure both of you kind of found out as you were building like the initial levels for Get a Grip Chip.
Yeah, definitely. There was also, you reminded me of maybe a more subtle thing that we tried to do definitely later in level design related to the checkpoints, which was we made the hit area for the checkpoints larger in certain cases.
Oh yeah.
And that, initially it sort of felt weird doing that. It's like, well, why are these checkpoints different than the others? Why are they sort of different? Why there are different colliders on it? But yeah, ultimately it was sort of to serve the purpose of getting into a flow, right? Like it just sort of felt unfair if you could see the checkpoint,
Yeah.
you were like right next to it, but you didn't happen to touch the exact right pixel to trigger it. So yeah, depending on the level design, there might be sort of a section where you travel through one area a couple of times and get a checkpoint. So we made the area for the checkpoint larger so that you're much more likely to hit the checkpoint.
Yeah. I think Passing Winds is one that is like that. There's like a central room, and the checkpoint is actually like almost the entire room, and it's not really. There's not much that's going to kill you anyways. Like you have to go. You would have had to go really far away, but it was to like add that peace of mind a little bit. It's just like when you pass through. Yeah, so it's a central room, one room up, one room to the right, and then one room below, and you would always have to pass through the central room to get to one of the other three rooms. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing that I wanted to touch on that you both were kind of talking about earlier with regards to, I guess, allowing for more freedom of play with Get a Grip Chip. That was one of the things that I noticed when I was playing is that the level design is wide in the sense that, as you said, it's not pixel perfect. Like I'm certainly you and your team did this as well. You imagine like a much harder version of this game. That pixel precise, Super Meat Boy levels of if you don't perfectly get the grapple of that exact pixel, you won't have the angle. You're going to die 100 times, and with the game, especially I think for like speedrunning purposes, like I noticed that there are some sections where you could just, if you knew what you were doing, just hold down right, and with proper grappling, you could just like time every cycle perfectly. I think I may have did that for like one or two levels during the stream. I didn't let go of the right button. I just like, I'm not stopping. We're just gonna see me just make it through this whole level.
Yeah. That is intentional for the speed running. And actually, so one of the things we did to do this, and it's actually like a performant feature as well, we've realized, I think, in especially console platformers. And so there's basically zones within the checkpoints that will activate when you get to it off camera, so which really does allow you to just flow straight through if you like time it right.
Yeah, that was something that was something you spent a good amount of time doing on all the levels, really, is taking a pass through them and making sure that there's more than one path that you can take to solve as many of the challenges as possible. Not all of them, but there's multiple paths.
Yeah. The speedrunner path.
The speedrunner,
check every nook and cranny path.
Yeah, the going backwards path because you forgot one of the battery bots.
Oh yeah.
Had an aha moment.
Yeah.
Yep, and again, that's very important from a level design standpoint. That you have those routes for somebody who's, grandmaster platformer, just as you have something for somebody who's still just trying to figure out this game. And I think one thing that we didn't touch on that I definitely wanted to ask both of you about are the battery bot sections, or specifically the secret rooms. because this was something I remember I commented about this while I was playing the game. It reminded me a lot of kind of Nintendo's philosophy with some of their secret challenges, like games like Yoshi, Kirby, and obviously the Mario titles, where the main path to the level, let's say it's a 5 out of 10 on the difficulty scale, and then we get to the secret rooms, that gets bumped up to maybe 6, 7. How did you approach, I guess, designing the secret areas in terms of how they related to the main content?
I think basically we just the idea was we would add 1 or 2 per level. We knew, and so yeah, it was like kind of a layer. You had part of the puzzle was finding it, and the second part was getting through it. I do think there's a little bit less towards the end of the game, partially from difficulty and fizzling out a little bit.
Yeah,
to be honest, and so there from there it was like just an idea of what it was. I think it like when it started, it was like in similar difficulty to the rest of the level, and then like knowing it was a secret room, we would just ramp it up a bit.
Add some hazards.
Yeah.
We also had a couple of cases where we had a section in a level that was, it was just too difficult in the rest of the flow of the level. So we sort of lifted it out of there and put it in the room because it just felt more appropriate. And I think a lot of that just came from the iteration, playing the levels over and over again, taking those passes for the different paths and different types of players.
And trying to like recycle as much as we could.
I do think that it was much more often that we had to make something easier than make it harder. I think, perhaps one of the things we did for the secret rooms is just not make them easier as much as the rest. The difficulty is definitely something throughout the whole process.
I think there was one level that we had to make more difficult because I think we had to make. I think there's a level in the 4th world. I think Bear Calypso was originally in the 1st world, but we had to move a level in the 4th world into the 1st world.
The whole thing's like a puzzle.
It was kind of like, okay, what is it easier to just like change the texture on the art and theme it and just make it harder? And I think that's what we ended up doing. It was easier to just make it a little bit harder. To move it from world 1 to world 4.
And in some of that shuffle, we did have to adjust up and down. Add an additional hazard or adjust the timing of one of the moving objects so that you had a shorter window to succeed.
And speaking about timing windows, one thing that I wanted to comment on, if I remember right, with Get a Grip Chip. You feature, I think, global timers, right, for kind of like the platforming cycles, or was it local? Or they would only behave when you got to that specific part in the level?
So, there's a mix. And as you're saying, like, there are particular sections where they're on triggers. So when you get close to that area of the level, everything will start to activate, and the timing is very consistent. But generally speaking, the game is on a global timer. So I think there are definitely sections of the game where we got the timing like just right. And it's perfect, and especially for speedrunners, you can fly through there exactly the same way every time. And for the rest of the game, I do think. For the most part, it's there, but it's maybe not exactly perfect because it's on that global timer. It makes it a little harder to get the timing exactly right based on what the player's doing.
With the checkpoints, if you reset.
That was actually part of the design decision around not having any health in the game. So we were concerned that sort of the insta-death would be too difficult for a lot of people, and I do think it is, one of the more challenging parts of the game. I think that we tried to work with the checkpoints We tried to work with the timing of the level to get it so that you could get into that flow.
Yeah. And like that, like circular movement. That like if you fail, you don't always die.
Right.
Yeah, you just have to go back around, or you can just like go halfway back to get back to where you were.
Yeah, you get another chance to try a particular challenge without dying.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with the whole ground mechanic, I know there are several cases where I kind of managed to save myself from missing a jump or missing something. One thing that I just thought of, that I think you mentioned earlier, with the grapple mechanic itself, that did you say originally that there was kind of like a charge, you could only grapple a limited number of times in the air, or was it always like an infinite grapple?
It was infinite grapples, but I think the time was set that it's set so you can't just like spam it repeatedly and just run through the level and just press it and hope you get it. So it slowed down a little bit.
Yeah, we built in a bunch of ways that there's some forgiveness to the grappling. So, and this is we probably spent a good 3 months just tweaking the timing of all. But yeah, things like if you press the grapple button twice quickly, faster than maybe what the slowest grapple is, right? For example, so if you press it really fast, you would expect there to be 2 grapples. So we use essentially it's called input buffering. We remember that you press the button, and we'll fire off the grapple. It's a little bit later than when you pressed it, but because you pressed it twice, we'll do it twice. So like little things like that you maybe would never even notice, but they just feel more natural, and the timing of the grapple feels like you are controlling it more directly. But yeah, in terms of the timing, we do have like a minimum time, and there's also a maximum time. If you're to hold it down forever, the grapple won't stay out forever. I forget how long it is now. It's like one second, something like that.
And I think that's always that funny. You're describing like 1 second, like. For people like watching don't play platformers, it doesn't sound like that big of a deal. But anyone who's played games like this knows that the difference of a half of a second can completely change the feel of something.
Yeah.
There was what was the change we made like towards the end of the game about something about how you moved in air.
Yeah. So we've been tweaking these numbers quite a lot. I think. We tried not to do it later in the project, but the difference that a fraction of a second makes is huge.
Totally changed the game.
One technique, and I forgot where I heard this first, but one technique that we're trying to use is whatever value you're working with, the timing of it, cut it in half or double it. Right, like make a dramatic change to it and see how it feels. And see if you totally overshot it, then you have a better sense of like where the sweet spot is, or if it's not enough, you can double it again. But sometimes it feels like maybe you're making too large of a change. But yeah, it's very very particular. So, the change that we made later in the process was actually to Chip's in air movement. So when you grapple, you move very quickly. The speed that you move towards the anchor point is a specific number that I don't remember. But it's faster than your walking or rolling speed. Driving?
Ground speed.
Yeah, your ground speed.
Yeah, we wanted to make it more appealing to be in the air than on the ground.
Yeah, and we found that people were sort of like, it was almost like they're trying to like claw ahead to go a little faster. Like it almost felt like a little soupy or muddy after you grapple. And so people wanted to go fast. We didn't want to change too much of the speed in the game because it would drastically change the size of the levels and the spacing of the levels. But we did end up changing the maximum speed you could go in air so that you don't slow down as much coming off of a grapple. That was a pretty significant change. We did have to rework some.
Yeah, but it was just a change to a number.
Yeah, one number.
Yeah, like very, very, like decimals changed. But we did have to space out a lot of the levels, and it felt like way better afterwards. Like you could tell.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Early on, in one of the early prototypes, we did have, I don't think it was actually the grappling mechanic. It was another one we were experimenting with, but we did have cooldowns, or like almost like, mana, essentially, right? You could sort of use it up and then it would have to recharge over time. And yeah, it just felt too limiting. So people just wanted to use the ability, they wanted to use the grapple. So it's like, well, why stop them from doing that?
Yeah.
Especially since, for this game, it is the main focus. We felt it's just going to be more fun and interesting if people want to sort of grapple at the ground, or at the, there's these lava blobs flying around. If you want to grapple at those, they'll spray some particles around.
Yeah, they don't do anything. It's just fun to like poke at.
Yeah.
One thing that I noticed about game like the movement in air was your descending speed. Like if you're trying to drop down, that he falls like kind of like floats down. Like I've played platformers where the second you go off the edge, it's like a boulder falling into the ocean. I guess. Did you do any play testing or like tweak things in terms of that kind of feel to it?
Yeah, I think I do remember like we changed the gravity specifically so it didn't feel like normal gravity.
Yeah, we so the game was built in Unity, and so for a while we were using just Unity's sort of default gravity setting for their for the physics engine part of it. And I think for a long time that was what sort of like, it's like natural gravity, more or less natural gravity. We found that people were, in playtesting, we found that people were missing grapples that they felt were very close. I mean, they were very close.
Yeah.
Because you're just dropping like a rock. And especially if you're trying to grapple something that's in front of you, you kind of have this like arm extended outwards. And if you're falling very quickly, it's hard to make the extension of the grapple reach the anchor at exactly the right time.
I think the falling is similar to the movement speed in all the other directions.
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
it's pretty consistent. So you'll accelerate to the maximum speed, which that one is it's 20 units per second. I don't know why I remember that one.
Spent a lot of time on this.
Yeah. But yeah, I remember when we put in the maximum falling speed, and so once you reach that speed, you don't move any faster.
Because I think it was like falling was, because it was so different from the movement in the other directions. It was really disorienting to fall and to like wrap your head around it. So we like moved the speed in every direction closer together. Yeah,
I think that also had the added benefit of making some of the speed running techniques more consistent as well. And maybe some speedrunners actually would prefer to have some little edge if you run backwards or something like that. But yeah, ultimately, I think being able to move at a particular top speed in any direction made things just more consistent overall and easier to play, easier to time.
Yep. And again, it's very tricky to know just how far you kind of want to push that kind of movement tech in a game like this. Because like you said, like you could have designed this, pure speedrun, the entire game built on like realistic physics and just go crazy like that. And there would be people who would probably really enjoy that, but it would alienate probably a huge amount of people who would play this game.
Yeah.
We were surprised also. So it was pretty close to the launch, actually. We had somebody playtesting the game who was trying to speedrun it, or who was speedrunning it. And they still managed to find a way to go faster than we intended.
That was really cool, actually. It's the way, I think it's in Tonal Troubles, in the second half where you have to like pull a switch and the chain keeps moving up with the anchors. essentially, like, if you time it just right as the chain is moving up, you don't need to wait for it to move into its position.
Yeah, and it very quickly sort of pulls you upwards.
Yeah.
And seeing something like that was great.
It was cool. Yeah, it was like, it wasn't a bug really. Like, they weren't, they realized they could fall through the ceiling in the secret room and walk across the top, and then suddenly be at the end of the level, which was also a thing that
we fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, seeing them sort of exploit the physics of the game a little bit to get a slight edge was nice, and it was also nice to see that it was contained to a particular part of a particular level.
Yeah, I think it helped because it each has its own theme. So if you're gonna try to like exploit something, it may only be contained within that level.
Yeah, we thought we had covered all of the any potential like speedrunning exploits.
Yeah,
but I'm sure there's still some in there.
Yeah.
All right. And as a quick time check for everyone watching, we are just about over an hour in. So I figure I have maybe 15, 20 more minutes of questions, if that works for both of you.
Yeah, that's great.
All right. And for the chat, if you do have any questions for John and Vicky about Get a Grip Chip or platforming, let us know in the comments or in the chat there. Now, with some of the mechanics themselves, again, with each world being its own unique flavor, I guess, what was kind of like your favorite mechanic, your favorite theme to design for the game?
Oh man,
it's a tough call.
Okay, so I guess like visually, the third abandoned world was probably the most fun to design. It just like the theme is really strong, and you can really like make the gameplay feel like the world is falling apart. And the explosive mines are really cool too in that. And I think that's the closest we started moving to enemies, because you can like activate them with your grapple and be a little strategic there.
Yeah, I was going to say the collapsing anchors or bolts.
Yeah.
Those I don't know if they're my favorite necessarily, but I really like those ones, like the possibilities that you can have in the level design, because if you haven't played the game yet, there's a certain type of anchor point where instead of just grappling to it, you grapple to it and it kind of shakes for a second and starts to fall. And what I like about that is that there's this inherent sort of nervousness that the player might get from that, and then it's going to collapse, and then you can also jump off of it while it's in the middle of collapsing. So there's quite a lot you can do with just this one relatively simple mechanic. And in terms of world building, it appears a lot in World 3.
Yeah. And then I think the first one, I guess the easiest was actually World 4, because it was like that. It's like a tech lab feel, so we could let it be a little bit boxier. And I think that was one of the first worlds that was finished.
That one's also like kind of more open, I feel like, than a lot of like exploration or alternate routes you can take, paths. I feel like we were experimenting a little bit in that one, in a different way than some of the other worlds. I was also going to say one of the mechanics that I liked working on is I suppose it's a group of mechanics, but the chase levels are fun to work on. So we tried to design the chase levels so that they time out with the music, right? So and the music won't progress until you've gotten to the next area. And getting the timing right for those, getting this consistent flow, and utilizing everything that you've learned in the world up to that point, in this sort of faster paced, higher stakes level,
slightly more precision-y.
Yeah,
those were really fun. They were designed like almost totally different from the rest of the levels. So the music was written first, And then we put in like vamps. So I guess like anyone that grew up doing musicals and operas, like you have like a few measures that like just can be repeated back and forth that you can easily transition to and then transition out of. So we put those in, and then that was where we roughly knew would be the checkpoints. And so we just like looked at how many seconds would pass by and just like kind of estimate like, okay, these are where the checkpoints are going to be. And then we would put down like we would just like listen to the music and like where are the strongest beats, and then like put down anchors, like where that would be, or an obstacle, or like a place you would land.
Yeah, to have that moment where the music could catch up, or
Yeah.
you could catch up to the music.
Yeah.
We did work with the composer as well, too, just especially on those levels, to make sure that the music tracks for those levels were unique, and that they had, the energy was much higher in those levels, and that they had those vamp moments.
Yeah, like that sense of urgency as well, in addition with like a sense of rest.
It'd be great to do, to sort of explore that type of idea more in another game sometime, with like integrating the gameplay with the music.
That's so fun. Like the flow, and it's something we realized. This is actually an influence from the Nintendo games. Is like timing the objects to the music, and so I think we realized this like in March, and then it also made the animating the objects gameplay a lot easier. So we basically all the objects are timed to the beat of whatever song got chosen for it, and so you can like get that like flow.
Yeah, and I know there's a neat developer called Locomalito who does a lot of modern retro kind of games, and I know like in interviews he said like he and like the person he works with for the composing of the music, they often design the music first and then they build the levels around that music. And I don't know if you saw the last Rayman game where they had these like musical levels. So like all of a sudden you have to do platforming, I think, time to Eye of the Tiger, which is just a crazy section.
Yeah, we couldn't get the licensing for that. That was definitely a big influence.
Those music levels from that Rayman game.
Yeah, ours are a little different in that it's not, it's not sort of, it's not like Guitar Hero where you have to jump to the major beats exactly.
It's pretty loose. There is a lot of accenting going on at once, and it's the way that like the music is actually written for that like type of flexibility. So like we'll have a group of notes accented. So if you hit like the anchor, within this set of 6 notes, it'll still sound like you like got it on a beat.
And I think we had some rough sketches of what we thought the level might be, or at least the main mechanics we were going to focus on. And then, the music was written, or at least a sketch of the music. And then we'd take a pass on the level design. And I think there was maybe a little bit of back and forth came first.
I think, the music was finished in, I think, May. And then so the levels were sketched out at that point and then finalized around it. And that was actually part of our like spreadsheeting. We knew like we had the concept art, so we took the concept art and like worked with the composer and said, this is this world, like the 4th world, the high-tech world is like a little techno-y, and so because it was like high-tech labby, and so the music was written that way.
That was one thing we're very fortunate. One aspect I like about the soundtrack in particular is that it spans a bunch of different genres of music. Like something's a little bit more electronic, some is more like jazz and rock.
There's some hip hop in there too. Real Fool has some really good hip hop influences.
The Abandoned World's got the hip hop.
All right, I think I have just one main question left, and then we have some questions from the chat, and then we'll probably go into kind of like our final, wrapping up stuff in a few minutes after that. But
Sure.
actually, Pony has got in Chad just mentioned what I was going to bring up, and that's the kind of quote unquote boss stages, the kind of like auto scrolling sections that kind of tie a bow on each world. What was kind of the inspiration to develop your quote unquote boss fights around that, as opposed to a traditional or even just more of a puzzle fight, which I know the final boss of the final level of Get a Grip Chip is kind of, I wouldn't say more of a traditional boss fight, but it is dealing with an antagonist on the screen.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is like totally unsexy, but it was the budget.
Partially the budget.
So basically, doing a different boss was gonna be, we knew it was gonna be very like resource intensive, and we weren't sure we could do that within the scope that we had. So we wanted to pick something like still something fun and unique. So that's how we ended up at the like chase level. So I guess this was like where it moved into like, precision-y platforming to make it harder.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew it would be fun. So like we still wanted it to be fun.
The other thing too is that I do think that was a lot of like what drove us to look for alternatives, I suppose.
Yeah.
But one of the other pieces there, I think, is that with the story of the game and the tone of it, I think we did want to avoid Chip, fighting people. The basic idea of the story is that he's there to save the day and not kill a bunch of people. So I think that the chase levels essentially fit very nicely into that, and then we could escalate it without it getting too violent.
Yeah, I guess Chip's not really engaging in any combat in any of like the preceding levels, so it didn't totally make sense for Chip to like actually engage in combat as the boss levels. And I guess like Chip still, even for the very final level,
spoilers,
where you do engage with an antagonist, it's not really in the traditional way.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. We're really bringing up in chat. Like, there's no dark and gritty reboot plan for Get a Grip Chill. It won't turn into a murdering stealth game in the sequel.
Yeah, maybe in a sequel or something we would do some combat, but
Chip's got scissors.
We'd be shooting for the cartoon violence rating.
One other thing that I was just thinking about that I almost forgot to ask both of you about, kind of the prerequisites for playing through the levels. Because for those of you who didn't watch us play Get a Grip Chip, each world, again, we have 5 worlds. I think it's 6 levels per world, and you have to collect a certain number of the battery bots in order to proceed. I guess, how did you settle on, what you wanted the skill floor to be in order to get to the end of the game? Because obviously you don't need to collect 100% in order to beat the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that this was also something that we adjusted quite a bit throughout the development. And I think we made sort of significant decisions in that progression throughout the development. And each time we made one of those decisions, we sort of went back and had to make adjustments to the level design. So, for example, I think, initially we wanted to have every level require a certain number of the bots to proceed.
Yeah.
But I think in testing that, we felt that you essentially get stopped too often, right? Like you don't have the flexibility to try a different challenge if you get stuck on something, or just to continue if you beat the level but you didn't get all the secrets.
Yeah, I think we actually just chose half and then just like tested it from there. It seemed fine. I think the most testing was how the levels that got unlocked within each world. So basically, each world you always unlock the first, and then after you unlock the first, I think the second, and then third, fourth, and fifth are actually unlocked all at once, which allows you to jump to do them in any order. Although the fifth one is still the most difficult.
Yeah, I think we're trying to balance a couple of different almost like requirements, right? Like we wanted people to have flexibility challenge they're taking on. We wanted to make sure that the difficulty was not too hard at the beginning. Like the player couldn't sort of shoot themselves in the foot, so to speak, by trying to take on a challenge that they're not ready for. But then we also wanted to make sure that they had seen enough of a particular world before moving on to the next one. So yeah, that's how, between all those things, I think we settled on the first two are in order, the next three unlock all at once, and then the last level, you have to have 50% of the bots. Yeah. And that also let us, it being 50%, also let us make half of the bots be much more challenging.
Yeah.
And someone can still finish the game and not get those more challenging ones if they don't want.
I feel like they completed a good chunk of the game.
Very much like in Super Mario or in the 3D Mario titles, where you don't need to get all 120 stars. I think you only need 60 or 70 in order to beat Mario 64. And then that allows you, again, free things up for the people who are, on the higher level or higher skill who want that extra challenge. Well, again, locking the game and saying, oh, you didn't get all these stars or all these bots, you can't beat this game.
Yeah. Yeah, that way you get bragging rights no matter how much of the game you complete.
But here's another question that just popped into my head. With regards to Chip only having one health point, and of course, touch any obstacle, you die or blow up and you go back to the checkpoint. Was there any point during development that you thought about having a live system? Because it's something that I see a lot of indie developers, especially those who try to build a modern retro platformer, tend to focus on, which I think, at least for the games I play, doesn't always necessarily work out to having the best experience.
Yeah. I think the way that we approached it actually was, so I think early on we did decide that we didn't really want to have lives, but where we sort of struggled with that was, well, what rewards do we offer to sort of balance that out? So, obviously in Mario or older games, well, in old arcade games, they're going after your quarters, really. But in slightly less old games, there's usually some reward, a reward that's worth more because it gives you an extra life, allows you to continue playing without any trouble. So it sort of gives those rewards more value. And so when we sat down, we said, well, we want to make it easier. We don't want to put this sort of limit. It feels a little bit arbitrary to say, okay, you got a game, start where you were. But yeah, we did try to find some balance with having enough sort of rewards in the game as well, so that there's reasons to explore, there's reasons to keep moving forward.
Yeah, and just I guess it was and also a design choice with we knew the more health you added, we suspected that, I mean, maybe you could do 1 to 2 hits, but it becomes much bigger in balancing.
Mm-hmm.
So this allowed us to focus on the movement of the player through the level.
Mm-hmm.
And built around that.
There's a nice little benefit of only having 1 hit point, basically, which is that the whole level resets when you die. So if you mess up a challenge, it resets and you can try that challenge again. And so for level design purposes, it made a couple of things a little bit easier.
Yep. And you mentioned, of course, earlier, the quickness you can restart a challenge after you die. That's another big point. You don't want the player to be waiting for a 5 to 10 second death animation or for things to reload. You want to just get right back into it so they don't forget what they're doing in that span of time.
Yeah.
And I think the timing of the objects is set. If you go through a checkpoint and there's a trigger, some of them are set on the opposite side, so it's coming towards you as you've reloaded the checkpoint, so that you don't have to sit there and wait
for it.
on top of the death that you just experienced.
Yeah, and that's another like killer for a lot of these games where you die, and then you have to wait for the whole cycle to reorient, and then
Yeah.
you die again. Then it's another minute and a half to wait for that perfect cycle to then
Yeah.
die again, and then it just adds a lot of unnecessary time. And
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
one of the compliments I want to give you and the team about Get a Grip Chip is that it doesn't feel like it wastes time. Like everything feels like it's meant to be in there. It does what it needs to do, and then it doesn't feel like it's being padded out or anything feels out of place in terms of the gameplay.
Yeah, yeah. We had to playtest the whole thing over and over. So.
Of course.
Yeah, so we cut out anything that felt tedious.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we didn't want to play it. Like it was going out. Yeah, I think like we definitely wanted every object, like everything has its purpose. Like there is a reason why everything moves from one direction to another, how long it moves, why it's in that level, and like why this obstacle is here. Like we didn't try to like we really we did find it it's really annoying when you pad out playtime by just like sticking obstacles in the way.
We also had a small technical hurdle there, which is that the levels needed to load very quickly, so that you could get back into the action really fast. So there's no like loading zones or anything like that within a level. So yeah, we definitely wanted you to get into a flow quickly and be able to stay there as long as you want, and have some fun, and then
and just move on.
Yeah.
All right. Before we get to the audience questions, any other aspects regarding level design, Get a Grip Chip in general, or anything else that either of you want to mention now?
Actually, okay. So I know, like earlier, we talked about like things that we wanted to add. One thing, we wanted to add was curved movement. And so if you look closely, like all the movement is actually like linear movement, and we didn't have time to add, I think, what are called like cattle curves to the movement. I think like we were able to do it in the background art to move curved, but you'll see like rotation from a point. But you won't see like that like roller coaster like level of a platform.
Yeah, it was like a technical challenge that we ran into that dictated a lot of our level design limitations, which I think in some ways actually helped us. And in other ways, we're like, well, it'd be nice if this particular platform was able to move in a curved way, like a roller coaster. Or like like in Tropical Freeze, they've got those great roller coaster levels. But moving platforms, as it turns out, are
really hard.
Yeah, they're very complicated to get right in a fast-paced, relatively precision platformer.
Yeah.
Definitely. All right, and I guess one other question. We've been talking about the music. I know some of the audience has been complimenting the music of the game. Who was the composer of the music for Get a Grip Chip?
So that was Stimmerman, and they're a band based in New York. So they're they have like a ton of influences in their music. Like they've got jazz and like rock, classical, and I think like how we found them is back in February. We went to like see them at a show, and we're just like, this really like this fits the music.
Yeah.
So we talked to them.
And I think we were looking for something that was, maybe a little unusual, or at least not sort of like traditional, or maybe like retro game type music. We're looking for some outside influence.
Like music you can like jam out to or work out to, actually.
All right. All right. So we have a few questions from chat. And then after that, we'll kind of begin to wrap things up for our discussion here. So, first question from Crispus asked, is there a sequel coming out? I know the game you just wrapped it up a few weeks ago, but people always want more.
We've talked about it.
Yeah.
At the moment, I think we don't have a plan directly to do a sequel. We are likely going to be starting our next project pretty soon.
Might stay in the platformer genre, although likely.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there is a sequel chip, but I don't know if it's going to be our next one.
Okay. Pony asked, how did you design Chip as a main character? Like, what was the inspiration, or where did he come from?
We've been posting on Twitter, actually, some of the old iterations. It's like some of our prototypes, playtesting levels with old versions of Chip in there. I think, we took, I guess, maybe like a traditional route of character design, in that we did sketching with our artists. We talked about generally, like, what does the character represent, or what's he all about? We did some sketching with the artists, starting in black and white. We actually took some of those sketches to playtesting sessions once or twice, and just asked people, like, out of these 6 sketches, which is your favorite? Pick a number.
We did learn, like, it is harder to get feedback directly on art, so we would ask this one a little bit more directly.
We knew, we tried to define some goals for the design of the character. Like, we wanted him to be, like, relatively cute and have appeal. So we wanted to use simple shapes in the overall design. We wanted to, have a character that was relatively easy to animate.
And we knew we wanted the grapple to stand out. Originally, the grapple was started from the center rather than the top of Chip's head, but, like, visually, it just, like, worked better and it looked better at the top.
He used to have kind of a big, like, monitor head with, the screen was eyes. And we sort of moved away from it. I think, it was, I don't know. The character definitely was sort of more appealing with this type of shape, and the big boxy head was getting awkward. It was kind of getting in the way of the grapple. I think ultimately the decision to put the grapple hook on his head was sort of when we really, like, hit the stride in the design, and we were just sort of refining from that point.
Okay. WRF Studios has 2 questions. The first one is, do you feel that having a demo helped in terms of, like, marketing or sales for the game?
It's hard to say.
I don't know if we measured that. I think it did help with, I would say yes. It actually, one thing, it added a urgency to, like, putting the game out there. I think we were in a festival when we were first releasing the demo, and we were having people playtest demo, and that was when we realized, like, even the demo was way too hard. So it did add that urgency, and, like, it actually helped us, like, set, I guess, like, a focal point of where we wanted the difficulty of the levels to be earlier on.
To your point, it forced us to essentially launch a game before we launched the full game. I think that was really, really helpful for us. I think in terms of, like, the marketing and the sales, I think it did help build, like, our Discord, I think, benefited. There's a couple people joining and playtesting and trying the demo. Being able to like, announce that we have a demo and just try and get some news, around that was helpful. But in terms of, like, helping the number of sales, it's maybe a little early to tell at the moment, but there isn't necessarily, like, a direct correlation that we've seen.
And as we've said, like, for those of you watching this live record, like, demos are a lot harder than you would think to put out for just about any game. Because if you do it wrong, then that's your first impression of a game. If you don't do anything, then people won't be able to see your game and make a determination they want to play it or not.
We tried to include a little bit of everything in the demo. I mean, not everything, but a taste of each of the main sort of things that you'll be doing in the game, including one of the chase levels. and I was a little hesitant maybe to put that chase level in the demo at first because I was worried, spoilers. But I ultimately I think it was a nice. It gave the demo a nice flow from beginning to end, and it was relatively quick, but it ends on a very high note. So that I think. I think the fact that the demo worked better because we included that was much more powerful than trying to prevent spoilers. I'd say that's maybe the biggest lesson that I've learned in releasing a demo and just talking about the game is that, we're relatively small at the moment, so any
press is
good press, yeah.
Well, yeah.
And that's actually a good segue into his other question. Did your studio do any kind of marketing prior to the release of the game?
Sort of. Not traditional. We're still learning how to do this, to be brutally honest. We basically started putting everything up on Twitter, like probably within 2 weeks of like starting work on this. And
from the beginning.
Yeah. Like back in January we had like white boxes up and like the old versions of Chip.
Yeah.
We did utilize Press Engine and Move It to send keys out. And let's see.
And that was about 2-3 weeks before launch?
It was about 3 launch.
Oh, right, sorry, 3 days.
About 2 weeks before launch, and then sent everything 3 days before launch, which I don't recommend. It really should. We've learned since then it really should be earlier because like you just like the press on the other side, they have like games coming at them all the time, so like they only that gives them 3 days to look at your game.
Yeah. We were doing regular social. Well, maybe irregular, but we started doing social media right from the beginning. Which just everything was very rough.
And just putting it up and kind of just seeing how people would react to it. And I think like we had never really used Twitter before, so we just started with Twitter to just get used to it and other social media.
And then like traditional sort of media or advertising, I guess we started a couple of days before launch, and we probably could have had more lead time.
I think another piece of marketing we did was we signed up for every virtual festival that we could get into.
Yeah, the virtual festivals were this year is a little crazy. But we did try to participate in as many events as we could.
And just engage in the community any way we could.
Yeah. And it's definitely difficult out there, especially for new developers in terms of marketing and just being able to reach out to people. And I definitely want to thank you two and the studio for reaching out to me in terms of being able to play the game and, of course, come on for this cast.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. It was really fun.
A few more questions. One was, do you plan on having any merchandise? Any like Chip, dolls or figures there?
We have some stickers. I think we're going to do some live streaming coming up relatively soon. We were planning on giving away some of those stickers on there, I think. We also experimented with
3D printing.
3D printing, so, someone we know was kind enough to sort of put together a 3D print of Chip. So I think we just got the versions of those a couple days ago, really. We haven't actually seen them yet, but another team member has them, so they're being sent over here. I'd love to do more of that if there's interest.
One last question from Will, and then I just thought of one other design question I want to ask you too. This is, of course, one of those always sticky questions to ask, but how has the game done from a financial perspective? If you're able, if you can comment on that. If you don't, I certainly understand.
Okay, so really, it's done okay. Like, it's had, like, the number of sales is, like, maybe at, like, a couple hundred, which is okay. But, like, it has very positive reviews, which we're stoked about.
Yeah, we were kind of anticipating not having like a huge reach for our first game, and obviously we're trying to do everything we can to expand the reach and get the word out. So thank you for holding us on the show. But yeah, so it hasn't exploded.
It's not Hades, but it's also not Hades.
Yeah. But yeah, I hope that with some additional updates we have coming out soon, and things like that, more news and more coverage, that sort of thing, that we'll see more traction and more pickup. But yeah.
All right, great. So the other question I wanted to ask, with regards to the actual grapple mechanic, one of the things that kind of separates Get a Grip Chip from some of the other games is that you're essentially, it's not exactly a twin stick kind of design, but you're able to move and aim the grapple independently. While a lot of older kind of grapple games, it's just basically a linear line. Like, wherever you are, it will always shoot at maybe like a 45-degree angle. I guess, with designing the game, how did you decide on, I guess, the control of the grapple mechanic? Because we've been touching on it here and there throughout the length of this cast.
I guess so. Like, we did actually play test it a lot. I think we did start with it was just one stick that just we moved and like kind of it aimed. It didn't work very well. That's like my not very detailed explanation of it. But then I think I guess we wanted that theme of more control. So we tried the 2-stick, and then I know we were going back and forth for a while between like a fully 360 or like the fixed points on it, and so like just playtesting it for a bit and just seeing how people reacted to it was like how we settled on it. Because we actually, I do remember going back and forth with fixed point 1 week at playtesting, and then switching over to like the fully continuous, and then like realizing that was not working well with our players, and then switching it back.
Yeah, I think we were looking, considering we have one main mechanic, we were looking for something that has enough variety in it that it can be sustained across the whole game. And in testing some of these things out, being able to aim in any direction really opened up a lot of possibilities for sort of expressiveness. So you can move to the right but aim to the left. You can drop down but aim up. It adds a ton of variety for a relatively simple type of change, I guess. And we did experiment with having the fixed directions, different button setups and different control schemes, and I think we were probably debating those up right until the end. But I don't think we really changed them past the first month or two.
Yeah, I think we did add a forgiveness change towards the end, which was basically like if you move right, the like angle that the joystick is pointed we increase the forgiveness on that. So I think you can be pointing like 30 to 45 degrees to the right, and you'll still go right, just because like you're only moving left and right anyways.
Yeah, we were seeing a problem where people were, they were getting into it and they're kind of excited and they're quite pressing exactly to the right. They were pressing sort of up and to the right.
Yeah, and Chip would move like kind of slow. And and this was like definitely a significant issue in the chase levels, because people would be like, why am I not going anywhere? Why am I moving? I want to go. And then, so that's what was causing that.
There's also a number of like forgiveness elements in how you aim and the direction that you'll go when you sort of launch off of one of the anchor points. So there's all these very careful timings about if you were pressing one direction or how far away you are from the anchor point. You sort of consider all of those elements and try to determine which way did the player intend to go when based on what they're pressing. And that was surprisingly complicated to get. Like looking at the code, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, the code works, but
it's not realistic at all.
Yeah.
All right. So, Crisp has asked, why is this the greatest game in all of history? So I think you definitely have a fan in the chat there.
That's a tough question.
Good old grappling fun.
Yeah. I think we set out to make something that's fun. That's not like a slog. It's not too difficult. And we tried to polish it and really make one thing very well, as opposed to trying to make 20 things that are mediocre. So hopefully, thank you. That's very nice. Yeah.
All right. So to begin to wrap things up then for our conversation, I guess my final set of questions for both of you. First one is, you mentioned earlier you're hoping to have like more content, you're developing more stuff for Get a Grip Chip. For the audience watching, can you give any teasers or anything about what's coming next?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll just be up front. Like, so we just translated it to Japanese, and so we're gonna work on PR and marketing that market, and we wanted to go through the process of localization, both from like a development and just from like a production standpoint. We've added skins; they're very punny.
Yeah, unlockable skins.
Yeah.
So those are meant to be coming in December.
Yeah.
So there should be an update to that in December that adds the unlockable skins.
But I guess like this also like ties into feedback that we've heard from players was like it was just adding more reason to collect the bots. So there's like more tie-in with collecting the bots and the skins.
Yeah, more rewards.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're pretty happy with the way that the skins came out, and you'll just have to see them when they're available. Yeah.
All right.
And so, I guess last one.
Yeah, you want
we're porting it to the Switch.
Nice.
Yeah.
Which is like that's actually really fun. Like doing the port, and like our programmers are doing the port themselves, and I guess like. Just talking to them about it, it's been like childhood dreams coming true. Like a run on the Switch.
Yeah.
So. Nice.
So yeah, we'll have some more information about that coming up. So check out our various channels: Twitter, Discord, everything, Facebook.
Yeah.
Great. So I guess here's my final question for both of you. As we said, with a game like Get a Grip Chip, it's a game that I think from the outset, a lot of people look at it as being very easy to design. It's always been one of the common traps of 2D platforming. But obviously, for both you and the rest of your team, you certainly did a lot, I think, with these mechanics, and especially being your first commercial title. So my final question for both of you is, for any developers watching this, whether they're working on 2D design or platforming, whatever, any, I guess, useful tips or things that you've learned through developing Get a Grip Chip that can be very useful for somebody coming in from the outside?
Yeah, I guess like don't like I would actually like recommend like emotionally removing yourself from anything there. Like you can't be too precious about something. Like I think like in terms of level design, like you can pretty much do anything. There's a lot you can do, and so like if something's not working, and like you may feel really strongly about it, but
yeah, you can't. What's the phrase? You can't hold on to your darlings or something.
Yeah,
something like that.
You have to kill your darlings, kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Maybe a little darker than I remember. But I guess my thought was similar in that. You can't be afraid to sort of let go of things, but if there's an opportunity to remove something, I think we've found that a lot of the times that, designing by removing elements can often lead to a cleaner or nicer result. Being really judicious about, is this sort of pushing the message that we were going for forward?
Yeah.
Or is it just noise? Is it getting in the way? And then being able to actually do that is can be
Yeah.
difficult.
Yeah, I think almost everything in the first 3 months of like we were just doing levels from the beginning. I think like all of that was it was cut. And I remember like towards the end we were just like, okay, this level's too long. We're just gonna cut this whole room.
Yeah.
Here. And
don't be afraid to cut, I guess, is a good
we did like I think we talked a lot about like shifting stuff around, but like we were like from that standpoint it was like the first step was like, okay, can we just like shift this to another level and will it fit there? But then if it wasn't working, like we just cut it.
And I guess to your point about the mentality that maybe platformers are easy to design, I would say every step of the process is very likely more difficult
than you think it is.
And I'm sure you've heard that 100 times. But I would try to make decisions around everything that will make your life easier. Still get a good result, something that you're proud to say you made, but that will make your life easier. Keep your scope in check.
Yeah.
Yes. And I would also clarify for people watching, playtesting and iteration, very important. Because it takes a lot to make these games feel good in the player's hands. And the only way you're going to know that is if you get in the hands of people. That actually reminds me, this was also brought up in chat earlier. With regards to playtesting, how did you find playtesters? Like any tips or any places you went to in particular to get people to play the game?
So in New York, we have at the beginning, before COVID, there's this bar called Wonderville holds playtest Wednesdays. I think every first Wednesday of the month. So that was actually the first place we went to. Mm-hmm. And then the NYU Game Center held playtest Thursdays every Thursday. So we were also going to those like literally every single week. And like we were actually building our schedule around the playtests. And then I think like when the pandemic started, we definitely leaned on family and friends, and we would just send people the build. I think Wonderville came back over the summer and did it virtually, so we were just using Discord to just show the game and then handing out keys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think having the Steam page up early and having the tools that Steam provides, like being able to hand out keys, was really helpful. And then Discord, I think a lot of the virtual playtesting we've done, we've been trying to find groups on Discord or any other virtual sort of medium, I guess. But participating in those has been great. Not only seeing other people's games, but getting feedback on ours.
Yeah, I think we went on Twitter and like Instagram and just asked people around us, like working closely on the project, to just like make calls on social media to like friends and acquaintances. And we just gave people test keys.
Yeah, we had a couple of open calls on Twitter as well. Just anybody who replies to this and wants to play test, we'll give you a key.
Oh, actually, that reminds us. We built an analytics system that tracked where people were dying. So it was only data points where people were dying. So how that worked, and like so this like fit our game more because like the spikes would happen where there were significant deaths. So I think it would be quite different on different games. But we could just like at first when we weren't always like getting video and hadn't figured out like instructions for like OBS. So we would just like give people keys and then we would count the number of deaths at a certain point, like open the level and count the deaths.
Yeah. So the virtual stuff, a lot of Discord, a lot of sort of playtesting meetups that we could, and the analytics was a good. It helped to quantify.
All right. So I think with that, final thing to ask both of you, do you have anything you'd like to say to the fans watching or anything at all to end the cast on?
Well, thank you for watching. And like Yeah, and also like thank you for playing, and like major thank you to our playtesters.
Yeah,
That-
yeah. Special thanks to the
Yeah.
playtesters. If you're enjoying the game, tell your friends. We're trying to get them. And thanks for giving it a go.
All right. And it was a pleasure hanging out with both of you for our chat tonight. I hope you have a great and safe Thanksgiving. And
Yeah, you too.
too.
thank you. And definitely best of luck with Get a Grip Chip. Like I said, really enjoyed the game. And for this being like your first official game, I think you nailed it pretty well in terms of platforming design. Because I've seen so many platformers from indie devs that always feel very rough to play. And I think with your play testing and just what you want out of this game, I think you hit as many points as you could.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That means a lot.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, and to end the cast on any social media you would like to plug, Facebook, Twitter, anything, feel free.
Yeah, sure. So you can find us on as Redstart Interactive, I think on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We have a Discord as well. That's in our Twitter.
Yep. Yeah, our handle is redstart_io. And come check us out on all of those or any of them. And certainly check out our Discord. We're on there basically every day, all the time, as well as with the rest of the team. So you can, if you have more questions, we'd be happy to answer them there too.
We'll talk game dev.
Yeah.
All right. And and for those of you watching this record, those should be links to the social media stuff in the description in the recorded version. So, with that, we're going to wrap things up for tonight. So again, thank you both for coming on, and hopefully in the future we can have you back on to discuss more about what's going on with Redstart.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Not a problem. For those of you watching this live or recorded, thank you for tuning in. As always, you can find me on Twitter at GWBicer. We have the Game Wisdom Discord in the description down below. And if you are a developer working on an upcoming or recently released game and want to come on and talk about it or just design, please get in touch. For those of you watching this live, I will be back on later tonight for our regular game streaming and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where he's in the art and science of games. Until next time, take care.
See ya.